Okay, so now we're going to go through the idea about demand um, and teach you a few concepts there. So I started this section talking about Adam Smith. He was a person or an economist in the exactly the same time that the American Declaration was signed in 1776. He published something called The Wealth of Nations. And this is sort of the beginning of all thinking around economics. And the key point I wanted to make with everyone was to talk about something called the invisible hand. So he came up with the idea that there is this invisible hand that guides the way people behave in markets. Okay, the invisible hand of supply and demand is the way that people interact in markets. And the reason why he came up with this thinking was, at the time, if the economy was good or the economy was bad, everyone sort of assumed that it was the government that would play a role in regulating it. And he came up with the idea that actually it's almost like magic. If you do nothing, the market will sort itself out. There's this invisible hand of supply and demand. It's because people are competitive. Human beings are naturally competitive. So if, for example, somebody is selling something cheaper than me and starts taking my business, well, I'm going to find a way to sell it cheaper than him, either by making it cheaper or whatever it might be, or I might change to a different business. But I naturally, because I'm competitive, will find a way to compete and to win. And he basically said that government really shouldn't play very much of a role. However, it does provide some important institutions, like making sure there's a court of law to protect people. He also had a few other ideas that didn't have to do with the unit. I just mentioned these in the class. He's the one who came up with the idea of the assembly line that later, the Ford Motor Company adopted to do the first assembly lines in the U.S. 200 years later. And the notion that trade is actually good for the economy is something that he came up with, and we'll cover some of these ideas later in the course. So demand is the desire or the willingness or the ability to buy a good or service. It's basically your desire and your ability and wanting and being able to purchase the things you like. And we all demand certain goods, whether it be a phone or shoes or a car. We all have demand for things because we have needs and wants. We have demand. Okay. And the first idea here is that there's a demand schedule. So the point is, when the price of something is low, if you look on the left at the price of widgets here, widgets are imaginary goods. At $1, people want a lot of widgets. But at $5, people don't want very many widgets. And that's the way life is. When something is more expensive, we want less. When something is cheaper, we want more. So it always seems to work in this direction. Okay, and if you took these numbers and you simply plotted them on a graph, you have 2 and 5, you have 4 and 4 and 6 and 3, 8 and 2. See, I'm just plotting the points. I assume you know how to do this. I get a curve that's going straight down, okay? And the curve really represents what we call the law of demand, which means that as price goes down, quantity increases. As price goes up, quantity decreases. The idea you're very familiar with: when things are cheaper, you buy more. When things are more expensive, you buy less. It's a very simple idea. So that's the way a demand curve works. However, different products behave differently. Now, the law of demand should always take place. The lower the price, the more we want. However, as I lower the price of some goods, quantity will increase a lot. As I lower the price of other goods, quantity might not increase as much. So let's take a look at that. If you think about the word elasticity, what does that mean? It means basically flexibility, right? Can you think of everyday items, like, for example, a rubber, a hairband is flexible, is elastic. Inelastic are things like wood or steel, right? Things that are very firm or stiff. So things that can bend are elastic. Things that can't bend are inelastic. In economics, elasticity is simply the degree to which demand quantity changes in reaction to a change in price, right? So when I lower my price, right, most goods you should be able to sell a lot more, okay? The more you can sell, the more elastic they are. But some goods, even though you lower the price, you can't sell them as much. Those are more inelastic, okay? So elastic goods have a higher change in demand when prices go up. You can think of a can of Coke. If a can of Coke today costs me $1, okay, I might buy one every day. But if I increase the price to $5, I might buy one a month. I'm not so interested in buying Coke. Why? Because I can buy other things, right? Inelastic goods don't really change, and a good way to think of this is gasoline or medicine. When you lower the price of gasoline, I might buy more, but at the end of the day, I can only use as much gasoline as I use to go to work, to do what I do. So even if you lower the price of gasoline at some point, it won't help me very much. Same is true with medicine. No matter what you do with medicine, if I need it, I'm going to pay the price. If you increase prices, I have to pay it. So if we look at the demand curve of elastic goods, and in class I use the idea of Travis Scott meals and gas. With a Travis Scott meal, what I said was a demand curve might look like this. And with gas, it might look like this. In other words, this one's more horizontal and this one's more vertical. And let's try to understand why this is the case by looking at this slide. If I move the price from 8 to 6, right, the blue line goes from 0 all the way to 4. Can you see that? Here's the 6. 6 is here. So the blue line goes from 0 to 4, but the red line only goes from 0 to 1, right? So when I lower the price from 8 to 6, the quantity changes a lot for the blue line, but it only changes a little bit for the red line, okay? So the more horizontal the line is, the more elastic it is. The more vertical, the more inelastic it is. Okay. Insulin is an example I gave in class. Insulin is what's used by diabetics to help process the sugar in their bodies. If a diabetic does not have insulin, he will get very sick and ultimately he will die. They have to inject insulins, depending on the severity of your condition, once a day, or it could be less than that, but insulin is extremely important. So no matter what you do to the price, I could price it at 2, at 3, at 4, at 5, the demand never changes. I always need the same amount of insulin. Therefore, it is completely inelastic. So that's a way you can think of being completely inelastic, means it's perfectly vertical. Now, demand curves can also shift. They can increase and they can decrease. So when a demand curve increases, it moves in this direction, okay? In class, I had created an imaginary economy, and I told people they had $5 to spend, and then I told people they had $8 to spend. And what happened was when I gave them $8, they bought more, right? Because they had more money to spend, and the demand curve shifted. But the best way to show this to you is just have a look at this little website. This here is a demand curve, right? So if I take that demand curve, and I shift it out, look what happens. In the original demand curve, D1, at a price of 120, I bought 300. But if I shift the curve out at 120, I'm willing to buy 450. Okay, so my demand increased. Therefore, I'm willing to buy more at the same price. Okay. By the same token, if my demand curve decreases for $1.20, I'm only willing to buy 100. Right? This was my original. I'm willing to buy 300. Now I'm only willing to buy 120 or whatever that number is. So as I shift it in or back, right, I'm willing to buy less at the same amount of money. Now I have to find my presentation again. Yeah, here it is. So in this case, the demand curve shifted out. It's just in this particular case, shifted out. It increased. Okay, and if I go to the next slide, the wealth of the economy can also decrease, and if that happens, it shifts this way. And we had done an exercise in class buying Snickers to demonstrate that, but I'll show you more examples. Now, the other thing is that related goods can affect the demand curve. So the demand curve can shift because of the economy. In other words, the economy grows, the economy contracts. But demand curve can also shift because of the impact of other goods. So I want to explain what I mean by this. Prices of related goods can cause a shift in demand. Now, basically, there's two kinds of related goods. There's a substitute good, is a product that can be used in place of another. So can you name a substitute for Coca-Cola? Hopefully your obvious choice is Pepsi or maybe even water. But Pepsi is a good one, right? Pepsi is almost an exact replica of Coca-Cola. If Coca-Cola is not available in the store, most likely you'll buy Pepsi, unless you really don't like Pepsi. So what happens to demand for Pepsi when Coca-Cola increases their price? So think about it. If a can of Coke is $1, I increase the price to $2. Are you still going to buy Coke? Maybe, but if Pepsi's still $1, why would I buy another Coke? Is it worth 2 times Pepsi? Probably not. You'd probably buy Pepsi. So this is what we call a substitute good. Right? What happens to the demand for Pepsi when Coke lowers their price? Right? If Coke goes from $1 to 50 cents, well, I'm going to buy more Coke. Even people that are buying Pepsi might shift to buying Coke. So these are substitute goods, right? So when the price of one goes down, right, the demand for the other also goes down. Okay, so the price of one works together with the demand of the other. They go in the same direction. Okay, so if demand moves in the same direction as the price of its substitute, so the price of a substitute, if the price of a substitute increases, right, if Pepsi gets more expensive, then there's more demand of Coke. In other words, the Coke demand curve shifts out. Okay, so they move in the same direction. Now, sometimes the easy way to remember this or make sense of it is just think of Coke and Pepsi. If I take the price up of Pepsi, what's going to happen? Less people are going to buy Pepsi. More people are going to buy Coke. Therefore, the Coke demand curve will shift out. Okay. Now, it can also shift in, right? So if the price of the substitute goes down, so if Pepsi decreases their price, right? Well, I'm going to buy more Pepsi. Therefore, the demand for Coke will go down. So here is Coke going down. All right, now there's another type of good called a complementary good, right? It's a product that is commonly used together. So, I asked, can you name a complement for tennis balls? Well, probably tennis rackets, right? So what happens to the demand for tennis balls if the demand for tennis rackets increases? Well, if more people are buying tennis balls, you can assume that more people are playing tennis. Therefore, more people need tennis rackets. So if the demand for tennis rackets declines, then more people will probably want tennis balls. Okay. So if the demand for if the demand for tennis rackets declines, then less people will want tennis balls, right? Because they go together. Right? If I buy a racket, I'm going to need a ball. If I don't buy a racket, I don't need a ball. Okay. So if the price of a substitute good decreases, right? If I used here the example of Xbox controllers and X games, another type of complement. If you can't play an Xbox game if you don't have a controller, right? If the price of an Xbox controller falls, right, then more people are going to want Xbox games, right? So the demand is going to increase. So if you remember with Coke and Pepsi, they kind of worked. Coke and Pepsi were substitutes, right? And I said if the price of Coke goes up, then the demand for Pepsi will go up, right? Here, they worked in the same direction. Here, they're going to work in opposite directions. So if the price of Xbox controllers go down, right, then more people will want Xbox games. So the quantity is going to go up. So in the case of a complement, they're moving in opposite directions. And if the price of a substitute goes up, then the demand will go down, right? So if the price of the controller goes up, then the demand for Xbox games will go down. And then I gave some real life examples just to bring it. So this, when I moved to Taipei, it was all motorcycles. People drove mopeds and motorcycles. If you go to Taipei now, it's all cars, right? So as the economy for Taiwan grew, the demand for cars grew, and it changed the entire economy, right? So the demand curve for cars basically shifted out as the economy became more wealthy, right? What did COVID-19 do to the demand curve for masks, right? Well, because of COVID-19, less people wanted, or sorry, more people were concerned for their health, and demand for masks obviously increased, right? So which one is that? Well, that's B, right? The demand curve shifted out. In other words, for the same price point, people were willing to buy a lot more, right? They're willing to buy a lot more. Yeah, they used to only buy here if the price were $3. Now at $3, they're willing to buy here. So the demand shifted out. What about restaurants in COVID, right? Well, they had to close a lot of the restaurants. There were lots of restrictions, so people couldn't go do dining until more recently. And so the demand shifted in, right? So for $3, I might have wanted, gone out to eat 6 times, but now I'm only willing to go out to eat 2 or 3 times. Okay, so the demand shifted back. Now, here's an example of a substitute, right? Over the past 20 years, there's been an explosion of alternative beverages, teas, juices, energy, right? What have these done to demand for carbonated beverages? So basically, as these items came into the market, right, demand for Coke would have decreased, right? These products were desired by people, and as a result, Coke decreased. And then this is streaming services, right? So as streaming services entered the market, what happened to demand for CD players? Well, as these products entered the market, then the CDs demand for CDs went down. Therefore, the demand for CD players went down. Okay, so when a substitute enters the market, it impacted demand. Okay, so just to review those concepts. So demand schedule is on the right. Okay, and it's, as you can see, as the quantity goes up, the price goes down, and vice versa. Or vice versa. A demand curve is a graph that's here. It's always pointed down, reflecting this table, right? As price goes up, demand goes down. As price goes down, demand goes up. The law of demand is basically saying that as price goes down, demand goes up. As price goes up, demand goes down. Okay, they move in opposite directions. Elasticity, remember, was the idea of bending. So that's the degree to which demand or quantity changes in reaction to a change in price. More elastic goods have bigger changes in quantity when the price changes. Coke, right? If I triple the price of Coke, you're definitely going to buy less. If I make Coke really cheap, you'll buy more. Okay, their curve is flatter. Less elastic goods, like medicine, it doesn't matter how much you change the price. Their curve is steeper, they won't move. Demand curves can shift. They can shift when the economy changes. So for example, if the economy gets bigger, people have more money to spend in their pockets, it can cause the demand curve to shift out. If people have less money in their pockets, it will shift in. Substitute goods can be used, or goods that can be used in the place of another, like Coke and Pepsi. Demand of a product moves in the same direction as the price of its substitute. Okay, so as the price of Pepsi goes up, that means less people want Pepsi. more people want Coke. Therefore, the demand of Coke goes up. So as the price of Pepsi goes up, the demand for Coke goes up. Opposite true with complementary goods. Remember, we talked about Xbox and Xbox controller, right? As the price of a complement goes up, right? Demand if the price of a complement goes up, okay, the demand of the item will go down, right? Or in reverse, if the price of the complement goes down, if the price of an Xbox controller goes down, the demand for Xbox players will go up. So substitute price of one works in the same direction as demand of the other. Complementary goods, price of one works in the opposite direction for the other. Okay, next video, supply.